My video project for this semester focuses on the current conflict in Syria, how it relates to the United States and Russia, and what the United States should do in response to this conflict. So starting off, I want to give a brief history on the Syrian war and how these different factions have gotten involved. The major crisis we are focusing on began in 2011 with the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring was an uprising of people against their government due to military oppression. These uprisings generally led to brutal civil wars throughout the Middle East and most of North Africa. But the Syrian uprisings mainly focused on overthrowing this man, President Bashar al-Assad, and his regime from the Syrian government. Assad's response to this was to unleash his military on the rebel groups. So this is where it gets a bit complicated. I'll try to make it as simple as possible. On one side of the conflict, we have the Syrian government, which is a Shiite group controlling the Sunni majority in Syria. They're backed by the Iranian government, who supports Syria by providing them money and military supplies. Russia also backed Syria, but not until 2011 when they began airstrikes. On the other side, we have the Syrian rebels, who are mainly a Sunni group that is supported by the United States and Saudi Arabia. But during this time, an extremist Sunni rebel group broke off to form the terrorist group known as ISIS. Now we have the three factions for this war: the Syrian government, the Syrian rebels, and ISIS. So, now that we have discussed the recent history of Syria, we can address where the United States and Russia stand in this conflict. The United States currently backs the Syrian rebels, as we said, in their fight against the Syrian government and ISIS. This support comes from the Pentagon in the training of Syrian rebels, as well as weapons to use against ISIS. Russia has dictated that their purpose in the Middle East was to combat ISIS with airstrikes, but instead has mostly bombed rebel groups fighting against the Syrian government, which now sparks controversy whether the United States should engage with Russia in Syria. The crisis in Syria raises another major problem, and that is the refugees. There have been hundreds of thousands of refugees fleeing Syria, trying to escape the brutal civil war. Now we move on to the solution. The United States will build a small city that can fit, let's say, about 10,000 to 20,000 refugees. These refugees will be trained in construction and agriculture, and they will be used to construct more homes and grow more food. We will turn the refugees into a self-sustaining city of refugees, at which point more will be added until the war is over. Eventually, they will begin constructing infrastructure and sustainable energy such as dams and solar plants, while others manufacture weapons to feed the war effort. One of the main reasons we need to accept these refugees is so when they return to Syria, the country will not be filled with war-torn, battle-hardened rebels who only know war. During this time, the United States will increase military presence in the Middle East in an effort to eliminate ISIS and overthrow Bashar al-Assad. After the war is over, the United States will not directly pull out of Syria and the Middle East. We will need to wait for a stable leader to enter the Syrian government who will not oppress any of its people. And then and only then will we slowly leave Syria. We do not want to have the Syrian people feel like we abandoned them. That does not seem to work out very well. But when we do finally leave, we should probably not return to the Middle East. We have enough of our own problems to deal with. And after the war is over, the refugees from the refugee city will be able to return back to their homes in Syria. The end. Here are a list of the works that I cited for this information.